Welcome, everybody. I've got Derek with me from the Star Trek CCG world, and we're here to do a tier list on Star Trek CCG, a game that I know a moderate amount about, but Derek, you know a lot more than I do, so you are better positioned to actually put this tier list together. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy this exercise. We're going to go chronologically, starting with Premier and ending with the Enterprise Collection. So we have 17 sets here total. Derek, welcome, man. We've never had you on, but we've been friends for a while, so I'm happy we finally got a video idea here.
Yeah, no, it's been a while. I mean, we've talked WoW TCG, we've talked Star Wars CCG, Star Trek, Lord of the Rings, all the other dead things, Lorcana, Star Wars Unlimited.
You're just reminding me all the things I've spent money on, and I'm like, oh yeah, that one. Oh yeah, that one. Okay, that one.
And it's only been like 2.5 years.
But we are here with the task ahead of us to put these from S to D, and if someone was wondering why we even S, someone asked that S is actually the highest ranking in Japanese. Like, I forget what it stands for, but it's like a Japanese
super
thing. Super duper. But do you want to kind of talk about your methodology before we jump in with Premier and kind of give a ranking of how you're thinking about this?
Yes. So just to preface everyone, because we know how tier lists work, it's all opinion based, right? So if you don't like this or you do agree with this, obviously leave a comment for Matt and he can deal with all the political stuff of comments. But, obviously I started in 97 when First Contact came out, played for a while, collected that. Then obviously teetered off a little bit in the early 2000s when I went to college, re-engaged back in 2012. When I was looking to get back into CCGs at that point, because we were all adults, had money, right? We've talked about this, why we've gotten back into it in our 30s and 40s. But I joined for the TrekCC.org. So those that know the Trek Continuing Committee, that is just like the Star Wars Player Committee and all the other committees out there continuing these dead CCGs for us. And really just got engaged with them. We were doing a lot of continentals and nationals, Trek Master events and all that stuff, traveling around the US, going to these fun things. They do stuff all over the world. They rotate world every year between Australia, Europe, and the US. So it's a lot of fun. And then I've even been on the design team for the Trek CC. I've developed 3 sets for them, and have been in some of the involvements of some of the rules changing and things, even some upcoming things that are hopefully going to produce here over the next year or so. But just, come with a bit of an opinion because I've been involved with the game for a long time. But we're really just going to focus on, like you said, these major 17 sets. We're not going to focus on anything that was basically some of the small boutique enhanced sets or the official tournament drafting, items that were there, or the anthologies sets where we're just basically preview cards. And we're obviously not going to go into the second edition where some of these backwards compatible cards were made for first edition. We're going to focus on the primary 17 sets that, like I said, folks can, really where they made a good impact to the game.
I feel like you just presented your credentials and I was like, wow, these are immaculate. Because the last one I did, people were like flaming, like, you've never played Mega Man, you can't possibly give it a ranking. I was like, oh, well, I did. So let's get this party started. So we're starting off with Premier, our first set here.
Yep. So Premier came out in 94. Obviously, I mean, it's what started it all, right? But if you think about why we were going to grade this where we're going to grade it at is for a couple of reasons, right? Obviously the impacts it had to the game at that point in time, as well as the longevity that the set had, right? There's some key things and stuff like that. I think some of the earlier sets you're going to see, some of them are probably going to rank a little bit lower simply because they lost when later sets came out with Power Curve, or Power Creep, right? As it's most known in the industry. Obviously, the Trek CC has done a lot to make these sets more viable, but we're going to put Premier at the first one at B. Kind of just the middle of the road, right? So if you think about it, it's got some great cards, right? It's got focus on the next generation. It's got the original bridge crew, John Luke, William T. Riker. It's got the U.S. Enterprise, but it was really heavy Federation focus. The Romulans and the Klingons and the non-aligned that were in there just didn't compare. So it was really top heavy with one affiliation, not spread out. And there's some really great cards, key cards that are still used today, but there's a lot of broken cards in there, cards that were very negative player experience. And for anyone that's familiar with Decipher, they did not like banning cards.
They'd rather you have a bad time than ban a card.
Yep. So
that's solid. You want to move on to our next one here?
Yep. So the next one was Alternate Universe. That's going to be a D rank. And actually, you could probably put the continuing Q continuum in there as well. Sad to say that really the first and second expansion are that low, but these sets, there's a handful of cards that are decent, but these are just some rough sets. I don't know if you know, the pack era, as people used to call it, the Premier Alternate Universe and Q era. There's just a lot of stuff in here that just, it's so hard, and some cool concepts and things that they use today. But like I said, just sets that, oh man, they are rough. So I apologize to the people watching and listening. I'm battling a little bit of cough right now, so I'm trying to keep it muted both ways. So.
No, you're doing awesome, man. Someone criticized Andy for saying like too much in a video, and I think he took it very personally. So,
all right. So the next one here is First Contact. This one is going to actually be an S rank. It's crazy to think why this is, but this is where I came into the game. So maybe there's a little bias to it. But again, if you think about what just happened over the past couple of years with the game, Premier, great way of getting it, but then Alternate Universe and Q Continuum were just dreadful sets. It really, really hurt Star Trek. And then here you have what I deem is probably the best Star Trek movie just came out in First Contact in 97. And then at that December, you're getting the First Contact set. And this actually introduced a new affiliation, the Borg. And they didn't play like any other, and they still don't play like any other affiliation. Have their almost own solitaire way of doing it with objectives and all that. But they introduced these objectives, and that's why it really redefined the game at a certain point and really brought a lot of people back into it when there was a kind of a period of lull and lost.
Yeah, my buddy Steve referred to First Contact as a soft reset of the game, which was interesting. Forthcoming video on that whole concept. But now we have the Red Chair, or the Fajo collection, which is I want to eat the bubble gum from it.
Fajo collection is actually going to be a B for me. It's a really cool. I mean, it's almost a boutique set, like we kind of saying we weren't going to put in this, but it's a little bit unique. One, because it really introduced some new cool concepts. Really got some really powerful cards introduced in the set that are still used today. Specifically, like for the Borg, you had Locutus of Borg, right? When Jean-Luc gets turned into assimilation. So it's got some really cool cards, things that actually became broken later on, even when the continuing committee took it over. So you definitely could see that there's still some cards in here. It obviously had Guinan, which nullified any AU card. You know, she became one of those cards that, you know, Temporal Michael Wormhole was later introduced in Voyager. She was a great card because she could nullify any AU dilemma or any card in itself. So, you know, so like I said, had some ups and downs, but put it at a B.
Okay. Next up, we have, I can't read the pack card.
No, this is so the early on game only had the TNG, the Next Generation license. The next set is Deep Space Nine. They actually got the license to start doing some of the other Trek series that came out, right? So they acquired the Deep Space Nine property from Decipher, we're saying here, to print that. And this is a really good solid set. This is an A for me. This set is so close to being an S. It obviously, you know, had all the 4 original affiliations that were from Premier, and then introduced the Cardassians and the Bajorans. It introduced the Deep Space Nine Terok Nor card, introduced Headquarters, which actually allowed starting additional more than 1 turn per card play, which is what the game really lacked early on, was you literally can only play 1 card at a time each turn, other than interrupts and stuff like that. But the idea here is that it wasn't quite an S for me, because the problem that they had when they introduced the Nors and the Headquarters was that they were all what they call non-duplicatable. Everything up to this point, if I had a Jean-Luc on the table other than original Premier, you could have a Jean-Luc if you were playing Federation. But when they introduced Headquarters and the Nors, they made it so that to help engagement, they made it where only the first player that played it or seeded it on the table actually had it, right? Not that you couldn't control it or take it over later, which was really cool for interaction, but it made it very hard where for somebody that was playing Cardassians and you were playing Bajorans, if I wanted to play Terok Nor, you got to play Deep Space Nine first. So I was SOL if I wanted to play Terok Nor, unless if I actually had to spend time getting out there and then eventually doing it. And it just became very clunky, very hard with sights and the way Nors work. So that's why I didn't put it as an S.
Makes a lot of sense.
All right. But to your point, though, it's almost kind of like another resoft launch with the game at that point. The next one is Dominion. This one I put as a B. This one just took a lot of what Deep Space Nine did well, and then really just focused it primarily on the Dominion affiliation. There are some other cards in there for the other affiliations and all that, but it really was just focused on Dominion, right? You had the 4 white border preview cards for some of the upcoming sets. So they had like the James T. Kirk or Captain Kirk from Trouble with Tribbles. They had the 7 of 9 Borg version, which was going to be from the Borg. They had the Worf, Son of Mog, which was going to be upcoming from Blaze of Glory. And then I'm trying to think what the other 4th one was. Now it's escaping me. But anyways, you know, some really good preview cards. But again, it was just so focused on one affiliation, which was a really good affiliation. But if you didn't want to, you know, play with the Dominion, all you had to do is buy a few singles that you needed for your deck. So that's why I ranked it at a B.
It's great how much better the pack art is getting as we go along here.
Yeah.
This is also roughly the pack art ranking, right?
Yes, there you go. So, all right. So after this is the Blaze of Glory set. This is going to be an S rank. So this did a lot of good things for the game at that point in time. It introduced a thing called tactics, which basically helped spaceship battle, right? Because you had 2 types of things that you did in the Star Trek game, right? You basically were solving missions, but you either had ground battle and then you were, you know, doing space battle. And then you were either solving missions on a planet or solving them in space. But this added a lot of focus, especially for the Klingons and Romulans, because now it kind of gave those 2 affiliations from TNG, like I mentioned back in Premier AQ, or I'm sorry, the pack era of those first 3 sets, where the Federation were just so ungodly overpowered that, you know, the other two affiliations just really lacked. This gave them power back because their ships were definitely more powerful and thematically than the Federation. And then introduced the tactics. So this really, and that's why Blaze of Glory is so hard to find nowadays with sealed, is because there was just so many packs that were opened. Because if you wanted to get that specific tactic for the side battle bridge doorway to play, you needed like 15 or 20 copies, right? And even though it was a common or uncommon tactic, you had to open up a lot of packs to get 2 or 3 out of a box, right? So really great time in the game because it really was engaging, brought some of those affiliations that have been lacking up to par with the other affiliations. It's
always fascinating to me the economics behind why some sets are expensive. You know, it's because you needed 15 of the commons for it, right? It's not that collectability like people think. It's like, oh, it's actually just because players drove this into oblivion, which is good, right? It's good. Yep. Open all sealed.
Yep. No, I mean that, and that's it too, right? Now you notice a lot with new common themes with games, they put a card cap, right? 2, 3, or 4 cards. Here, you can put anything in your deck as big as your deck as big as you want. It didn't really matter. And then, like I said, the tactics, you know, people wanted consistency. So if they had 30 to 50 of one tactic underneath it, you know, that's what they did. All right. Our next one here is the rules of acquisition, which is going to be a C. It's our first C here. Kind of the same thing with the Dominion. This one just really focused on the Ferengi and some of the non-aligned smuggling or the not so good underbelly world of TNG and Deep Space Nine. And really was, again, some really cool cards out of here, especially later with what the Trek CC has done with allowing those affiliations to mix. But the Romulans couldn't, I'm not the Romulans, sorry, the Ferengi couldn't mix with anybody. Very difficult, right? So unless if they were a specific card you wanted to do, you could play them to your Deep Space Nine, but trying to make them work with the Feds and the Bajorans, just like they did in Deep Space Nine, really couldn't pull it off. So that's why this would be ranked as a C.
All right, now we have this tropical looking pack.
This was the Troubles with Tribbles. So this, they were still struggling to get the full license for the TOS, but they were able to work around this at this time with the expansion. Because if you're a Deep Space Nine fan, they had a great episode called Trials and Tribulations, right? And the idea was the Deep Space Nine crew went back in time, and they went back to the time with Kirk, and they had, you know, really cool back from the time, right, where they had it, where they were taking the film from the original series, and they had the characters in front, right, and merging it, where they were having that slight interactions and stuff, or people in the background and all that. And so they were able to get away with some of this because technically it was in Deep Space Nine. But the set overall, though, I'm going to rank as an A for this set, because this is some really key classic Federation personnel. They're really good. And at the time, they really had some powerful downloads, right? One of the things that also made First Contact such a great set was they introduced the download icon. You know, and again, this is where almost every one of the characters, the main characters from the classic film era, the original series era, as they introduced that icon, really just became, you know, really good for solving missions and having kind of that instant, you know, I need a card to, you know, pass this dilemma, or I need a phaser or something to gain a skill or to up my strength. I can download it instantly at any time in that game, right? Based off what my opponent throws at me. So really good and powerful set. The next one here is going to be Mirror Mirror. This one's a C. This one, unfortunately, is a mixed bag. It introduced another new quadrant, which was the Mirror Quadrant, but it was really lacking in power. Every mission for the Mirror Quadrant didn't go past 30 points. You had to do a lot of objective things like that. You didn't get a whole, I mean, you got some free plays, but it was really hard to mix cards and stuff like that. There's some really good cards out of there again, but I felt overall at that time, this set very lacked. One of the other things that I put why this set was so bad, anyone that knows nowadays, it's a terrible thing to open it and the whole entire pack be warped, even though it's brand new and sealed. Whatever they did with their quality of printing at this time, this set was terrible because the cards would come minty, pack fresh, but be warped.
Like a moisture issue or something, like a wet warehouse.
Yeah, it was whatever they did. I mean, like I said, the box would look great. You'd open up the packs and you'd be like, why is this like bent, twisted almost? Kind of like, so, all right. Now, at that point, that's kind of where then we're going to go into another kind of resoft launch at the time with Voyager. Voyager is going to be an A for me. Excuse me. Probably it could be an S if you consider what it did for being the focus of the game at the time. The problem was this is where you really saw power crept. This became a really bad time in the game because it was anyone that's familiar with the game, there's kind of two parts to the game, right? The first is the seed phase where you seed your missions, your dilemmas, and all that stuff that you need to do to kind of set up the board. And both you and your player are kind of interacting, but everything's kind of hidden, right? For the most part, unless if later, once you start revealing those seeded cards and what you're going to play. And then after that, you actually have the game where then you're playing, you're drawing your hand, you're playing your cards, and then you're trying to go off and solve the missions or interact with your opponent. The problem is that, you know, games were like an hour and 15 hour and a half. When Voyager came in, it literally turned the game upside down because the cards were so powerful, the missions were worth so much that games could literally be won first turn. And so the game became so bad where they were literally spending that hour and 15 minutes for allotment time, the first 50 minutes to 60 minutes in just the seed phase. So all they were doing is literally just saying, okay, if my opponent plays this mission here, what kind of dilemmas am I going to have to do to make sure I stop him? Because if I don't stop him, he's going to solve it and he's going to win the game. And excuse me, sorry, apologies. And with that, it just made the game really, really bad. Really, really, you know, it made everything else obsolete. Because again, all the new main characters had 6, 7 skills, attributes up the wazoo, and the game just wasn't fun.
It's like an overcorrection. People complaining games are too long. Now games are too short. I mean, that's the thing about power creep is it forces people to buy new product and they want to stay competitive. And it's inevitability in most games, in all games, you're going to just see that happening. It's what happens with video games. You level up or whatever, right? And you just, everything you used to do is now too easy. But I think sometimes can be pretty abusive, and it sounds like that's the case for Voyager. We have the Borg up next.
Yep. So the Borg is going to be a B. Again, really good set with powerful cards and stuff like that. Apologies, man. The coffee's just not coming and going away. This introduced the Hirogen, some really cool tactics, items for, you know, people to play with another affiliation. But it just didn't have much other than just being a smaller subset of Voyager. So, you know, it's got some cards again, things that are, you know, Hirogen's a phenomenal affiliation, still used to this day, with holograms and stuff like that. But, you know, just as a B for me.
Okay, we have 4 left here. Well, 2 expansions and then 2 kind of products.
Yes. So the next one here is the Holodeck Adventures. This to me is an A. Again, this is not an A. I'm sorry, an S. I'm sorry, is an S. This here is a again power crept expansion because it's obviously getting towards the end, right? But the great thing about this is then it kind of brought the power creep back to the other 2 sets or 2 timeline errors, right? With the TNG and with Deep Space Nine. It introduced the holo programs, which brought really some good flavorful interaction, some that are still super abusive even today that had to been toned down. But a lot of cool cards, things that just, you know, again, what Voyager was focused with the Delta Quadrant, this was allowing the Alpha Quadrant and the Gamma Quadrant to be irrelevant again. So overall, great set.
I will just add that from a kind of more of the collector observer realm, this thematically seems so cool to me. It just seems like just a phenomenal set. And I will also say the motion picture set, I have no idea where you're about to rank this. This one could go low. I don't know. But a motion picture set is just very cool and iconic to me as just a random collector.
Yeah. The motion pictures, honestly, because it has such a nostalgic value, is great, but it's actually going to be a B. The problem with the motion pictures was it introduced the classic film feds and stuff like that, but the other affiliations just lacked, right? So you had a little bit of Klingons and like 2 Romulans, which are, you know, basically non-essential. And treaties are very risky to play, even in today's standards. And that's really what you had to do. And again, you had to play everything to one time location. You had to have the treaty in play. You had to keep it protected. So again, you could play the classic feds or the classic film feds, but it just was very limited. The other problem is that it introduced 2 of the great characters, villains from the other classic films, which were going to be Khan, right? Obviously, everyone loves Khan, which is a very good, somewhat deck, but very limited as well. And very hard to pull off, especially in that time. And then the other was Sybok, which was a non-complete idea. He unfortunately, the deck that they made for him was not good. And, you know, that alone would have been probably an E tier and how efficient the Sybok deck was. So it just felt very unfinished. Like if they had a chance to do more expansions with it, right, would have been good. But for as much as that set is limited to trying to cover all the 6 movies, trying to do some stuff, it's just, you know, a nice, like you said, pretty beautiful set. But gameplay wise, it had a little bit of some cool stuff, but otherwise it's nothing special.
All right, all good things, aka the thing no one could find. Right.
So this one here, to your point, is, you know, one of the most valuable sets out there, but it's actually a C, right? It's a 54 card subset that was trying to fill in some gaps, some of the broken links in a sense that were out there. Introduced some new cards for each of the affiliations and some other stuff, but again, it was just kind of a rush thing. You know, again, if you bought it, you played with it, it had some cool stuff. But really it was just, like I said, filling in a few things for some of the other previous things, but didn't really revitalize the game. Cause again, at that point it was, you know, towards the end that they were focusing on 2nd edition. And then the last thing was the Enterprise set, which is the same thing. It's a C. I really probably could have lowered this to a D because it is, again, an 18 card boutique set. And it's only the Starfleet, which Starfleet does not mix with Federation. It's a completely different affiliation. They didn't give them any treaties, anything. So to be fair, it's probably not even really worth playing other than if you're going to mix a bunch of non-aligned to it. So it probably could be a D, but I kept it because it was at least the last push for the Starfleet.
So is it true? Is it so? All Good Things was very hard to find. Was the Enterprise Collection like widely available? Like I know that happened with Lord of the Rings, like set 19. What's it called? Like Final Farewell or something. But you know that is still available for like $40 sealed. Is that sort of the case for the Enterprise Collection?
So yeah, so Enterprise was overly printed. It was something you had to submit in for. All Good Things was basically for local shops to order stuff, right? And they had to order, selective. But the thing was is that All Good Things was nice because it was basically like another anthology, right? It had like 6 or 10 packs of reflections in it. It had the 54 boutique set. It had, basically a small anthology carrying case, right? So you could put multiple decks in there, sleeved, all that stuff. So it was really some good stuff, but trying to find it, like I said, it was basically purchased to order, right? So
Mhm.
if they only, I can't remember the amount they made, but if only 5,000 people basically ordered it, that's all they printed, right? Everything else they just mass produced. Enterprise was kind of the same thing, but up to that point, again, it's very in the Decipher era only world. It's only the 18 cards. It's really not non-functional. Again, what the Trek CC's done with it, and even to what they try to push a little bit with the 2E backwards compatible stuff to make them, but they still just weren't very functional. But yeah, it's obviously picked up steam now over the past year or so because everybody's the $50 days are gone when people are trying to find it sealed for $400 or $500 now.
Well, this has been a really fun exercise, Derek. I learned a lot today, and I would love to hear our viewers' thoughts on, what should be higher, what should be lower. I was happy to see a few in our D. I feel like anytime you put something in the D tier, people are like, oh, that's wrong. But ultimately, you have to rank things, and things have to be at the top, and things have to be at the bottom. My final question for you: what do you think the best set is? I have a guess that you're going to say First Contact, but that's I'm curious your opinion.
Probably the best set. Give me a second here. It's hard to say because it depends on what you're looking for. Yeah, First Contact again has that nostalgic value. I felt like it was, like you said, kind of a soft relaunch. It, the cards became a lot cleaner looking, like they weren't as dry as the original pack era cards. If you notice, like, as Decipher got better with printing. But I would probably say it's actually Blaze of Glory or Deep Space Nine. Blaze of Glory, like I said, because it just revitalized the game. It made some of the weaker affiliations very competitive with the other affiliations. But Deep Space Nine, just because, like I said, there was a whole plethora of new affiliations to add in. They got the new license for the additional properties besides TNG, so that really helped bring in a lot of people. Deep Space Nine was still fresh, right? It wasn't something that wasn't no longer in production, right? They were still coming out with new episodes. But I would definitely probably say Blaze of Glory because, again, it's just one of those times when you were at a tournament scene, it flew off the shelf because people wanted that specific. Again, they built tactics. There was like 15 or 16 in the set, but each 1 or 2 was for a specific affiliation. So if your affiliation were, the Romulans or the Klingons or the Borg, you needed these specific cards. So you had to buy it. But it was just, like I said, really helped revitalize the game at that point.
Well, I have a lot to think about here, a lot to ponder. You kind of make me want to get into Star Trek. But let's wrap it up here. We might do a future iteration, maybe with 2E. I know nothing about 2E.
I don't care for 2E. It's the nostalgic value, but I just also don't think it's a cleaner looking game. Play wise, it's actually technically a better mechanical game. But to me, it doesn't feel like, and some of these 2E fanatics and some of my friends are going to argue with me. When you play 1E, you can build it to feel like a Star Trek episode or movie. With 2E, you could reskin it to whatever because it's a great mechanical game. You could reskin it to whatever, and it would function the same way.
Okay, I did not know that. So, Derek, thank you so much for sharing your immense amount of knowledge here. Like, subscribe, all that stuff. Please tell us what your tier list would be, and we will be back with more stuff. You've been a great guest, so.
Thank you. Appreciate the listeners putting up with my constant muting of my dealing with my cough. So I appreciate you as the host, Matt, for the invite. So,
all right. Well, thanks for hanging out, everybody, and we'll catch you next time.